This is a Hot Pie Media original.
It is ugly in every way, but it's high profile to say the least, and that is the trial that has just started of teenager Kyle Rittenhouse. Kyle Rittenhouse, for people that don't remember, and you may not want to remember, and nobody would blame you for not wanting to remember, is the kid, and I'm not kidding when I say the kid, who travels to Kenosha, Wisconsin, post-police shooting, and there's riots and protesting going on in Wisconsin. He's the kid walking around with the rifle and ends up shooting and killing two people. He shot three, and then he became somewhat of a celebrity. His murder trial is happening as we speak. For better or worse, he's been stuck with us as our unofficial legal analyst. He is Stephen Toland. This is a slight rant first, but I think there may be something to it. This case of this kid is so ugly and disturbing on its face, and how he has been, and I guess will continue to be hijacked as some sort of poster child for vigilantes is so disturbing. And then the fact that he had a legal team, which you can tell me, I can't believe this is not the definition of malpractice. He has a legal team that gloms onto he and his mom and starts raising money on his case for candidates. It's just an ugly, whatever the legal minutia is of this is a really ugly, sad story in America. There's my rant. Sorry.
That's a fair rant. Good morning. Happy Friday on
yes,
that
sir.
one, huh?
Yeah, sorry about that. I just go back about a year or so ago to that picture of this kid, thinking this is an American street, and here's a kid, a baby-faced kid who's obsessed with playing cop, is holding a rifle, and he kills a couple people, and he's celebrated. Ugh.
Yeah, the whole raising of money and the national spotlight about it, and some of the different PACs, I guess you would call them, that are sending out email blasts, and I've gotten some of those. It's very different. It's distasteful, probably, and I don't know how much people in that community of Kenosha know, or how many potential jurors on the jury pool knew about that. I'm sure they did. Yeah,
okay. Well, all right. So you're stuck here. You're gonna make the case both ways.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. So the charge is, the official charge for this kid is what?
Well, you've got 2 counts of murder, 1 count of attempted murder, and then you've got, I think, an illegal possession of a dangerous weapon, which is a Wisconsin statute. Obviously, they're all Wisconsin statutes. I just mean that one may be unique to Wisconsin. There may be a 4th one, I can't remember, but those are the 3 big ones, I would imagine.
All right, let's start with this, and maybe I'll argue just for argument's sake throughout. Make the prosecution's case that this kid murdered 2 people.
Well, it's not justified in self-defense. So if you're the prosecution, you're going to argue that he is inexperienced. You're going to hear from witness testimony about that, about how he's acting, what his real stated objectives were, to kind of be a hero, or to go in there and make a name for himself, not knowing what he was doing, that he really doesn't have any experience to provide medical aid to anybody. He's 17 at the time, that he was in illegal possession of a dangerous weapon. It's one thing to go there at a young age and want to help others. There's plenty of service organizations or groups or whatever you could do to do that. If I'm the prosecution, I'm arguing no, that he had a different objective there. That's why you had somebody like a straw man purchase, get him a dangerous weapon at his age, which he's not entitled to lawfully in Wisconsin, or really in Texas or anywhere, to possess or own. So I'm going to focus on those things, the backstory, and then I'm just going to focus on his actions that night,
So he went there so people understand the mindset. First of all, would you do this as a prosecutor? I mean, again, I cannot help but be any parent. And this kid has just been steered in the wrong. So he's been taking pictures.
Parents, right?
Okay, yeah. I mean, I don't even know what to say about mom. Mom's crazy too. Yeah. But he sort of has all these pictures growing up of him kind of wanting to be a cop.
Sure.
And sort of paints this picture of a kid who really wanted to be a vigilante. Is that stuff fair game?
Sure it is. Absolutely. Particularly in a murder case. So we call that pretext evidence, or, sometimes character evidence pretextually in murder cases, it's a different standard. I imagine Wisconsin's that way too. So that stuff comes in a little bit. That stuff can come in. Yeah.
Because he said he went there for medical reasons, or what? I can't even remember his real answer why he was even there.
He claims to go aid and assist those businesses that are being ransacked, if you will, and to provide medical aid to those in need. And so he had a medical kit that he had purchased, and then he had somebody do a straw man purchase of a dangerous weapon. Now, I mean, if I'm a prosecutor, I'm going to look at like what medical experience could anyone testify about? Did you hear any evidence about that? I mean, did you see anything on social media or anything like that? Does he have an interest in medicine? Is he pre-med? Is he a biology major? I mean, you could go into any of that stuff. I mean, and what's this medical kit look like? Is it one of those tiny ones you buy at CVS or Walgreens, or is it an actual?
Right. I mean, and he traveled there, right? He's not even from the area.
There's a whole issue to me about standing and sort of subrogating yourself into the shoes of local police and stuff like that. And it also paints police in a bad light. Police aren't vigilantes. Police are people who care about your community and want to do well and want to protect people and serve people. Bad cops are bad cops, and we get that. And we don't want, but any more than we don't want bad surgeons or bad teachers or anyone else. But the point is that he doesn't really, what standing or knowledge does he have about protecting the local businesses or community? He's not from that community. So that is a big deal. If I'm a prosecutor, I'm going to make a big deal out of that.
Okay. Maybe
and I'm also careful. I'm careful as a prosecutor. He's young,
right,
and there's some empathy there, and you've got an interesting mix of jurors there. You're going to end up with 12. You got 19 now after one got booted yesterday, which I'm sure.
Oh my God! Tell people why that genius got booted. Right? Oh my God! He's bragging about killing a black guy. The judge hears it and says, "Oh my, get out of here, knucklehead."
Yeah, I don't know Judge Schroeder's, particular leanings on any issue, obviously, right? But this judge, from what it sounded like, said, "Look, all eyes of the country are on this case. It's very important that when this case is resolved, that it looks like it's done fairly without bias." And your comments are totally distasteful.
Yeah.
You're out of here.
Yeah, it's a bad look already. I mean, it's already a bad look. But I don't know how relevant this is, and it may just be a sidebar issue. Why is he allowed? I mean, you talk about law enforcement.
Right.
Who was okay in law enforcement with this kid walking around pointing that gun at people?
Well, that's this whole weird space we are in America, wherein you're allowed to possess weapons in public places, but you're not allowed to point them at people in a dangerous way or cause them reasonable apprehension of fear. Which I just see somebody walking around with a weapon like that. That's going to cause me some apprehension or fear. But I guess in and of itself, that's not illegal. But of course, his age, no one knows his age, but that is illegal. That's one of the things we'll talk about.
But he looked, I don't, I get that someone, by the letter of the law, somebody would say, you have no right to ask my papers, but it's a baby-faced kid. I mean, it seemed pretty obvious. Right. It's a teenager walking around pointing a rifle at people. It's not going to end well.
So that's the argument I make as a prosecutor. So far on these two witnesses, you can see that's kind of what this prosecutor is doing. There's this guy, Balch, B-A-L-C-H, and he's a former Iraq veteran. And so he's kind of a 50-50 witness, I guess I would say, because he says some favorable stuff for the defense. But for this, we're talking about the prosecution side first, because that's what you asked me about first. On that one, he talks about the way Rittenhouse is acting. He's carrying a weapon in a very unsafe way. It's making everyone around him uncomfortable the way he's walking around. He's very uncomfortable. He's nervous. He's jittery. He seems way out of his league, and so there's a lot of testimony about his behavior that night of just seeming way in over his head and just walking around carrying this weapon, just very hyper, and so that stuff I would point out at you. I'm curious about that. So, I mean, obviously the kid doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't know how to handle the weapon. He's already being described justifiably as a nervous wreck. He's a mess. People notice he's a mess. Yep.
But does that help you in a murder charge, or maybe slightly in a twisted, weird way defend him a little bit?
Well, I see where you're going with that. So a defense argument would be what's reasonable subjectively to that person, right? So you have to be reasonable in your belief that deadly force is necessary to defend you. There's a bunch of rules in Texas, 4 primary rules in it. I don't know what those are, specifically in Wisconsin, but you have to be reasonable. That's one of the prerequisites to this. So you could argue that, hey, it's reasonable for him is going to be different than reasonable for you, 35, 40-year-old Kenoshan adult. I get it, but we got to put ourselves in his shoes as best we can. So you could argue that could help, but I don't think it does. I think what it does is help the prosecution say, look, man, we can have empathy for this poor kid, but people are dead because of his actions, and that's that. I mean, you know what I mean? Don't feel so sorry for him that you don't follow the law. And so the prosecution can then kind of be careful about not being too aggressive on him. Just kind of depends on how aggressive the defense is. I think if I'm the prosecution, I'm kind of I'm going to show everything, warts and all, because some of these witnesses, some of this video you're going to see doesn't always perfectly lay out the state's case. But I'm going to say, look, I've been transparent and open with you. This is what we got. And, that's what you got. And I think they can win on that. And I think then if the defense gets too aggressive, then you could go back and paint him more as an aggressive vigilante as opposed to a naive 17-year-old who's in over his head. Okay. But I think you got both sides available to you as a prosecution, and that's nice for the prosecution.
All right, interesting. All right, so now here you go, counselor. Defend him. Defend him on a murder charge.
Well, what I would do I don't know how to defend him yet on Huber because Huber is a little different. But the first gentleman who's killed, is this guy Rosenbaum. And so what I would argue is kind of what the defense is already setting up is that this guy Balch, this first witness they had, all testified that Rosenbaum had lunged for and attempted to grab the rifle out of Rittenhouse's hands. Now you could argue he may subjectively look baby-faced and be acting a certain way, but unfortunately, there doesn't seem yet to be somebody from Rosenbaum's perspective to say that Rosenbaum was trying to keep Rittenhouse from hurting him. It just seemed like he was chasing after him. And then according to witness testimony, including one of them, like an FBI agent, I think it was, said that Rittenhouse had yelled friendly, friendly, friendly as he's being chased. And then at some point after that, Rosenbaum lunged at the rifle in his hands and fell backwards. So that I would argue at that point, Rittenhouse, I don't know how it works that he's illegally possessing the firearm. Yeah. That's the part that I think is tricky. Because in Texas, it's an affirmative defense, and you're not really allowed if you're in the course of an illegal conduct. If you're committing an illegal act, you're not really able to avail yourselves of that defense. So, if you're illegally in possession of this weapon because you're under 17 at the time, not to mention federal potential violations of straw man purchases, et cetera, that we haven't even talked about that. He might not be able to avail himself of that defense.
But Steve, isn't my comeback to that? Okay, I have every right to be in the streets, and I have no idea who this person is walking around with a rifle pointed at me. I got 2 options if there's a rifle pointed at me because he's not a cop. So there's some lunatic in this day and age of mass shooters. What are we supposed to do? Either run or we have to fight back. I'm going to argue if I'm the prosecution. Well, the guy, of course, he's fighting back. He's trying to take the gun away from the lunatic because he doesn't know who he is. He's not a cop. Well, he's a shooter.
Yeah, you got a lot of people who keep sort of taking matters in their own hands. Is kind of what I would argue. Is that, look, if Mr. Rosenbaum was that concerned about diffusing the situation, perhaps he should have gone and asked a police officer for help, reported him, or just walked the other way and reported him, things like that, instead of trying himself to wrestle away a weapon from somebody after you chase him. I mean, that's what I would argue.
Okay.
I don't love that argument, but I mean,
that's That's what I mean. It seems pretty obvious already with the whole story about he lunged at him. There, the crazy kid just reacted. But okay, so there's that murder charge, right? That one you're going to say he lunged at him. The other guy is on a skateboard. Good luck with that one.
Right. So the second gentleman, I guess, was trying to diffuse that situation at that point. And who knows? I think it depends a lot on what was said after that and how much remorse was shown or fear was shown or what he was doing after that, Rittenhouse being he. And then I think at that point, it's hard to argue that See, another prerequisite in this whole issue of self-defense is what we call proportionality. And so I'm only allowed to exact deadly force on someone in proportion to the deadly force they first exacted upon me. I can't be the primary aggressor.
Okay.
And I've got to make it proportional. And then when this issue de-escalates, then I don't necessarily have a duty to retreat, but I certainly have a duty. Well, I know I don't have a duty to retreat in Texas. I don't know about Wisconsin, but I certainly have a duty to no longer continue to exercise deadly force on the person, right? So I don't know, a skateboard versus a semi-automatic rifle. I'm going to argue.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to argue if I'm the defense that, that's a deadly weapon and could be a deadly weapon. And I'm going to find cases where if you're impaled on the head with that type, you're going to, I know. You're just asking me to
I know. No, I know. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that. I told you got to defend him. You're doing it.
I got to defend him. So, and so that's what I would argue is that at that point, the guy, I had to look at body strength and size and launch angle and all kinds of stuff, but the third person is this guy, Grosskreutz, I think is how you say that. And he actually was wounded. So he had a firearm and approached, of course, after Rittenhouse has now shot 2 people. And so that one to me is, I guess you could just argue. So you'd have to stay. It's kind of an all or nothing deal here. So this is all going quickly is what you'd argue as a defense. And you'd argue, look, if I'm in the right on the first and the second, then therefore at that point I'm in on the third. And that's why you see the defense using the words like ambush. They're trying to set the tone of this was an ambush on him from jump for whatever. And they're trying to make it political. They're trying to say, look, these were people who didn't want, they wanted to loot and riot to make a message here, to send a message. That's the kind of BS or whatever.
Yeah, they're gonna paint them as sort of these anarchists that are burning down businesses and
Right. So I think that's why you're seeing the defense paint such a broad brush on purpose to say, look, from my client, Mr. Rittenhouse's perspective, that's all ongoing. These 3 are kind of one unified group from his perspective, subjectively attacking him, and that's why he feels justified in acting out in the force with the type of force that he acted out on.
John McClellan is the co-founder and creator of ATX Hot Sauce, now in all 50 states and several retail outlets as well. So what we're going to do today is we're going to let this social media rock star chef walk us through 4 different sauces, and then I'll taste, and we'll tell everyone why they should buy. You can give the science behind these, and then I'll make the simple recommendation. Go to atxhotsauce.com. All right,
I don't think anybody's heard the website.
Yeah, I know.
By you, Jeff,
I've never heard that.
It is atxhotsauce.com.
I'll say
I got that one right.
345 times, atxhotsauce.com. So let's do it.
I brought 4 flavors here, and we're going to test your palate today. Okay. And I only brought 4 because I didn't think you could handle 5 or 6.
Yes,
probably a smart move. Yeah. And so the first one we're going to try here, it's called Beet Heat. And just like the name implies, it has beets in it. It's made with red Fresno peppers. Red Fresnos are red peppers that are they're hotter than a jalapeno and a little bit less than a serrano. So not super hot here, just a lot of really good flavor. So we're going to start with this one, and then we're going to move up the chain.
Okay. I've had the Beet Heat, but okay.
Yeah, we're going to try it though.
It goes well with a cab. All right, Jeff's savoring Beet
I'll
Heat.
even do it with you, so that should be all right. Now remember, it is hot sauce.
Yeah. Oh, it is. It's hot sauce. Trust me, man.
Wait,
is
that one hot to you?
No, a little.
Yeah. The great thing with the fermentation process is you get a bunch of the flavor right up front.
Yeah.
And then the heat comes, but then it dissipates pretty quickly, especially with the red Fresnos. This is not a very spicy one, but it is a very tasty one. Goes on great on sandwiches.
Beet Heat.
Beet Heat. B-E-E-T. Heat.
All right. Go to atxhotsauce.com.
That's right.
Like everything else with this, the optics are terrible. It's ugly. It's uncomfortable. It's just, to me, it's just a really pathetic, sad state. But you're the prosecution and your defense. Here this kid is with his crazy mom and all these hangers-on that have sort of glommed onto him. He leaves jail and goes to a bar wearing like Free Kyle shirts, and there's like this celebration for him. I know it's a bad look. Does it matter? Is there context to that?
I think it does matter. So I think if I'm the defense, I'm and I know they didn't do this, I would think about ways to inoculate that from the beginning, that this is such a, that I would try to the extent I could argue that, again, I am wanting to go off to college and make a difference in the world, or I have a plan here to go and help. And that was always my plan. And so I can't help that my story has been hijacked by powers way bigger than me. And so I got swept up in that. I'm only 18, that kind of stuff. That's all I could think to do to inoculate some of that stuff,
Yeah, because I think that really makes it tough for you, doesn't it?
Yes, I believe it
Yeah.
would. I mean, I would stay.
Can you blame that on mom's crazy, poor kid is messed up, bad upbringing, mom's a nut job. Can you blame that on her?
You can. I mean, you got to commit to that. I mean, so you got to decide, do you need mom for anything else? Because if you don't need mom as a witness for anything, which I assume they don't, then yeah, you can throw mom under the bus. It doesn't always work super well for either side, to be honest with you. But it comes out as a wash, usually in my experience. Anytime I'm calling a mom, I'm always like, the optics of this are bad either way.
Yeah. No,
when mom's my star witness, I'm really not that excited about. Where
that
I
makes sense.
In my defense. But I do think you'd have to argue that he just got swept up in the moment, and he wasn't trying to profit or do anything like that. That's separate, and it's unfair, and it's the prosecution trying to take your eye away from the key critical issues of self-defense in this case. And I would just try and launch it back on the prosecution. They're just grasping at straws here, that they're, come on, that's not the real issue. They're trying to take your eye off the ball here. Is
this a murder case, all or nothing? Is that the way this works? I mean, there's no way to end up in a middle ground?
Probably not. I mean, no. I mean,
So then a jury has to be
voluntary. It's a voluntary intentional act. So, I mean, manslaughter is an involuntary. It can voluntariness can be an issue, or intent can be an issue. Those kinds of things. This is an intentional act. He's asserting the affirmative defense. And I don't know if Wisconsin has the affirmative defense like Texas does. We have what we call justification defenses in Chapter 9 of our Code of Procedure. But the idea is that you have to affirmatively assert that. And in Wisconsin, it seems a little bit different. But I mean, it's all you're saying, look, I meant to do this because I felt I was justified in doing it. If I didn't, I'd be killed. And I wasn't the primary aggressor. And I assume he's got to be able to show, or the state's got to be able to prove that he was the primary aggressor. He started all this.
In a weird way, I'm not sure. I know people in this area know the story, but I don't know about the rest of the country. We have our own similar story right down the street from me, and that is guys sitting at a light. There's an actual protest. It's not burning buildings. It's not that stuff. It's just a walk in the streets, Black Lives Matter protests. Guy's carrying his gun, which is perfectly legal. This is a terrible, sad story.
It is.
He claims a car lunges at them. He points the rifle inside the car, and an Uber or rideshare driver blasts him, kills him, pulls around the corner, calls 911. That's a bizarre case. Are there spin-off issues of the Rittenhouse thing that we can see similarities here? I mean, in the beginning, it seemed pretty cut and dry. You point a rifle in somebody's face, it's not going to end well. That was kind of the my basic black and white takeaway to this. But it seems like there's more nuance to it now.
Yes, I think. I mean, what do you do if you're walking with your children, or you're walking across, or even by yourself, and a car is starting to come, and you're worried about? I mean, they're not going 60 miles an hour. I mean, let's say they're at a standstill and they start to move forward. Yeah. What's your normal reaction? Hold your hand up, right? Hey, wait, or something like that. It's usually not to point a rifle in their face. So I think that you can make some arguments like that, but it seems that's a hot mess. It really is on both sides. I mean, I guess you're an Uber driver. You're wondering, why are you? I mean, that's kind of the prosecution's theory about it. I can tell you just from what I hear on the streets here a little bit is that, everyone knew that was going on, and you're an Uber driver, and what are you doing driving that? That's the least circuitous, productive, profitable way for you to go as an Uber driver.
Right. Let's not kid
ourselves. There's no benefit to you as an Uber driver. That's like, I'm going to pick up some people from a UT game, and you're like, meet me right in the center of where all the traffic is. It's just, that's part of the problem.
So
I think, with the defense.
the way that case is now, or I don't even know where it is, it seemed as if the prosecution was starting to paint a
You want me to
picture.
predict what's going on at the Travis County DA's office?
No, I'm not gonna. I mean, I'll
Not
make
gonna
it.
do
I mean, if you really want to ruin the rest of your day, I'll do it if you want.
That's a whole nother. We can do a week show on
No.
what might be going on.
But what I'm getting at is, I mean, because it's a hot mess and it doesn't feel right. And if there's a backstory to the Uber driver, he has made statements on social media. It makes it look like he went there looking for a fight, is I guess what I'm saying is, can you really build a prosecution's case on, yeah. And common sense tells you, Uber driver, you don't show up in the middle of a giant protest and just sit there at the light. That doesn't make sense. But that's not enough to me to paint this guy as kind of a vigilante himself looking for a fight. So is the social media comments, racist comments, gun comments, is that enough to paint a picture in front of a jury that says that dude didn't just get stuck there that night? That guy went down there looking for a fight. Is that the case?
Yes,
Okay.
it is very much. And I don't know the whole backstory. I know there are some incendiary comments, big time, from what I hear. But I just remember at the beginning when this case came out, I think I was, supposed to talk to some media outlet about it or something, and then it changed. The tenor and tone of the story changed when that digital footprint was uncovered, right? And it was bad. And yes, because again, murder cases are different. You can go into sort of pretext. You're allowed to go into some backstory about what someone's character might be or what their relationship is to the potential victim or to the situation at hand, which you would try and then sort of piggyback on to the victim in this case. And so, that's all fair game. And it's the way you kind of show a type of motive there. You're not because what you're doing in self-defense is you're trying to say, I didn't go to why it's valid and why it's so relevant is a prerequisite. One of the first prong of the 4 prongs of a self-defense with deadly force in Texas case is that I wasn't the primary aggressor and that I wasn't doing anything unlawful. And so, I mean, you can argue driving your car in a if there's barricades that he went through or something, there's some of that. We've seen that before in Austin, sadly, although it's a little bit different. But and then you'd also argue that you were the primary aggressor. Like, let's look at your backstory. It's not what you're saying isn't true. Like, you're going to claim that, so I'm going to attack it. And they have to claim it as a defense. They have to assert they weren't the primary aggressor. So the prosecution, absolutely, it's fair game to go in and discredit that.
It's such a weird story because it's one of these times where the initial reaction was, I think we all bought into it, and maybe it's the truth, but here's an Uber driver stuck in downtown, frustrated, just sitting there throwing his hands up. Next thing he knows, somebody's pointing a rifle. He reacts, don't point a rifle at people.
That's the other argument. The counter argument is, okay, so the police have set up and everyone knows, and most of these people are I wouldn't say sophisticated protest goers per se. That may be a bit of a stretch, but there's enough of a fluid flow of communication where people are uploading routes of where this flow of traffic is going vis-a-vis this protest so that people know where to go. And the Uber driver can say, well, I knew where to go too, because they were supposed to be over there. And then like a flow of like 50 or 100 people totally just started breaking traffic laws, cutting across, pushing cars. They're being aggressive. And I'm trying to get the hell out of there.
Yeah.
I'm actually now on the defensive and I'm worried about my safety. People are pushing my car. I'm trying to get away. And so that's an argument I'd make if I could.
I thought at one point he tried to say they climbed on the hood of the car or something. I mean,
sure.
I think we all bought into that early. Either way, what an impossible spot for gun rights activists. They get it both ways on this one. Yeah. Right? Nothing works. Nothing works.
I know. It goes back to one of the government's witnesses in the Rittenhouse case was just it. And again, this person kind of came across as a little bit 50-50, but seemed very genuine. And just saying, like, it made me super uncomfortable the way many people, but specifically Mr. Rittenhouse, were carrying their weapons and stuff. It's not the way I was raised to carry a weapon.
Right.
I mean, that's kind of the piece that's always, I mean, when I was younger, if you were around firearms, it was a big freaking deal.
Yeah.
able to have your safety, and your parents were just big on that.
Yeah, it's not an outrageous thing to say. You walk around pointing a rifle at people, it's not going to end well. It's just not, it's a bad start. It's not going to end well.
Nothing good happens after midnight. There's a lot of good rules. Don't play cards with a woman with a tattoo of a dagger on her body.
Wait, what?
There's a lot of good cardinal rules. That's what
it is. The card one is. I didn't know that one. Is that a legal thing?
It might be.
Okay.
It might be. Yeah.
Would you have represented? No, that's a bad question.
Yeah. Would I have represented who?
Hang on. No.
I'm not really above reproach.
I figured that. That's why I stopped myself. I mean, you're a lawyer, so you'll do it.
You know the answer to that one.
Yeah,
already.
I know. I stopped myself. Jenna Ryan, how about her? That Dallas, the realtor in Dallas who just got sentenced to 60 days. I mean, I'm ripping her to shreds today. She's the one that said she was the insurrectionist. I called her airhead insurrectionist, but she's on her way to jail. And then she leaves the courthouse. She gets sentenced to 60 days after saying on Twitter, I'm not going to jail because I'm white and blonde, blah, blah, blah. And sure enough, the judge gets her 60 days. And then there's this soundbite of her blaming it on her comments on Twitter.
Yeah, it's asinine. Yeah,
don't you whisper in your client's ear and saying, just own it and shut up?
Well, we do have a lot of chats about that. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, right? I'm just thinking.
Yeah.
I go, lady.
I don't know. I don't know how big the paycheck would have to be to represent somebody like that.
Yeah, I know. But my gosh. Okay, it's thrown back in your face. It's embarrassing. I mean, it's all bad now. I mean, you look like a fool. And first thing she did was just make it worse and go, I guess you can't have free speech on Twitter. It's like, no, lady, you went in to kill Mike Pence, right?
Well, it's so interesting that people just somehow have lost this connection. But you have free speech doesn't mean you're free of consequences for your speech. You have undeniable, unfettered access to say whatever the hell you want. Doesn't mean, though, there aren't going to be consequences for certain things you say. It's just common sense. It goes back to the oldest case in the book about yelling fire in a crowded movie theater.
Yeah.
You can yell it, sure. May not be allowed to go back to the movie theater, and you might get thrown in jail for that. But, yeah, you got free speech if you want, pal.
I'm watching her lawyer there. I'm thinking, you need her to just take off and run because she just ruined everything. Yeah.
Right. But, that's like representing celebrities who then go back and do stupid things, and you're just like, oh man, you can't get out of your own way. But she sounds like she wants all that attention. I don't know.
Yeah. She got
an agenda there,
Well, she's going to be in a jumpsuit at least for a while.
Maybe she wants the Orange is the New Black, and she's bringing it back. Something, I don't know. She's got a plan, man. Don't get in the way of her plan, Jeff.
Yeah, no way. You ever try that with a client? You ever drop that line on a client that's on their way to jail?
No.
I'm sure yours never go to. What am I saying? I mean, no one ever goes to jail. Yeah, jeez, that was stupid.
One of my clients go to jail, Jeff.
I know. I'm sorry. I was just making it up, I guess. All right, Steve. As always, good talking to you, man.
Good visiting with you. Have a good rest of the week.
All right, thanks.
From the Hot Pie Media Studios in Austin, Texas, it's the Jeff Ward Show. Listen at jeffwardshow.com.